What I'm about to tell you will haunt you. It haunted me for 17 years, and there were nights when I thought it would destroy me completely. But I need you to hear this story because what happened in the small town of Millbrook, Oregon, represents the most unforgivable crime I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And I was the one who had to live through every agonizing second of it. Before you even think about scrolling away, I need you to understand something. This isn't just another sad story. This is a story about betrayal at its most fundamental level, about a crime so calculated and so cold that when you hear who committed it and why, you're going to feel sick to your stomach. But more importantly, this is a story about survival, about justice, and about the moment when the truth finally came screaming into the light. If this story moves you, if it makes you think about the people in your own life and the secrets they might be keeping, I need you to do something for me right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like this one, stories that need to be told. Hit that notification bell because you're not going to want to miss what comes next. Do it now because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see the world. My name is Marcus Chen, and in 1998, I was 11 years old. I lived with my mother, Grace Chen, in a modest 2-bedroom house on Maple Street. My father had left when I was 3, or at least that's what I was told. I had no memory of him, just a single photograph that my mother kept in her bedside drawer. In that photo, he looked kind, with gentle eyes and a warm smile. My mother never spoke about him except to say that some men weren't meant to be fathers, that some men couldn't handle the weight of a family. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my mother. Our life was simple, but good. My mother worked as a nurse at Millbrook General Hospital, taking double shifts whenever she could to make sure we had everything we needed. I never felt poor, though I understood that other kids had more than I did. What I had was a mother who loved me fiercely, who helped me with my homework every night, who made my favorite dinner every Friday without fail, who told me stories about her own childhood in San Francisco before she moved to Oregon. She told me her parents had died when she was young, that she had no siblings, that we were all each other had in the world. And that made our bond feel sacred, unbreakable. I would have done anything for her. I would have believed anything she told me. The summer of 1998 was the hottest Millbrook had ever seen. The heat pressed down on our little town like a weight, making everything feel slow and heavy and strange. I spent most of my days at the community pool with my best friend, Tommy Rodriguez, or exploring the woods at the edge of town. Those woods seemed to stretch forever, full of mysteries and secrets, full of places that felt like they belonged only to me. It was in those woods that I first found the cabin. It sat in a clearing about a mile from the main trail, half hidden by overgrown bushes and wild vegetation. The structure looked abandoned, its windows dark, and its door hanging slightly open. Most kids would have run away, would have felt the wrongness of that place, and trusted their instincts. But I was curious by nature, and curiosity has always been both my greatest gift and my most dangerous flaw. I didn't enter the cabin that first day. Something stopped me, some feeling I couldn't name. But I remember standing there for a long time, staring at that dark doorway, feeling like the cabin was staring back at me, like it was waiting for something. When I got home that evening, my mother was cooking dinner. She looked tired, the kind of deep exhaustion that comes from too many shifts and not enough sleep. But when she saw me, her face lit up the way it always did, and she pulled me into a hug that lasted just a little too long. That night, she asked me about my day, and I told her about the pool and about Tommy and about the games we had played. But I didn't tell her about the cabin. I don't know why I kept that secret. Maybe because it felt like something that belonged only to me. Maybe because some part of me, some instinct I didn't understand, knew that telling her would change something between us. That was the beginning, the moment when my life started splitting into two paths, the life I was living and the life that was hidden from me. I didn't know it then, but every day that passed brought me closer to a truth so terrible that when I finally discovered it, I would wish I had never found that cabin in the woods. The following week, I went back. This time I brought a flashlight and a pocket knife, trying to feel brave. The cabin looked exactly the same, frozen in time, waiting for me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot or decay, but something else, something familiar. Dust hung in the air like frozen snow, dancing in the beam of my flashlight. The cabin was small, just one room with a simple cot in the corner and a wooden table against the wall. On that table, I saw something that made my heart stop. Photographs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, spread across the surface in overlapping piles. And in every single photograph, I saw myself. Baby pictures, first steps, birthday parties, school photos, moments from my life that I remembered, and moments I didn't. Every stage of my childhood was documented there, captured and collected, and kept in this abandoned cabin in the middle of nowhere. My hands were shaking as I picked up the photographs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Some of them showed me with my mother, ordinary domestic scenes that could have come from any family album. But others showed me alone, photographed from a distance, as if someone had been watching me without my knowledge. At the bottom of the pile, I found something else. A letter, folded and refolded so many times that the creases had become permanent lines across the paper. The handwriting was neat and careful, and the words were addressed to me. Marcus, if you're reading this, then I've either succeeded or I've failed. Either way, I need you to know the truth. Your mother is not who she says she is, and I am not the man who abandoned you. My name is Daniel Chen, and I am your father. And for the last 8 years, I have been trying to save you from the woman who stole you from me. I read those words 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. They didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. My mother loved me. My mother would never hurt me. My mother was the only person in the world I could trust. But as I stood in that cabin, surrounded by the evidence of a life I didn't know existed, I felt the first crack form in everything I had ever believed. And I knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic or reason, that my life was about to change forever. I took the letter and 3 of the photographs and shoved them into my pocket. Then I ran home as fast as my legs could carry me, my heart pounding and my mind racing. When I burst through the front door, my mother looked up from the couch where she was reading, concern immediately flooding her features. Marcus, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. And in that moment, looking at her face, the face I had loved and trusted for my entire life, I made a choice. I lied. Nothing, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Just ran too fast. Got spooked by a deer in the woods? She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face for something. Then she smiled and opened her arms, and I went to her the way I always did, letting her hold me close. But for the first time in my life, her embrace felt different. For the first time, I was aware of how tightly she held on. And I found myself wondering whether that grip was love or something else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed with the photographs hidden under my mattress and the letter memorized word for word, and I tried to understand what was happening to me. Either my father was a liar, a crazy person making up stories to hurt my mother, or my mother was something I couldn't bring myself to name. I was 11 years old, and I was about to learn that the people we love the most are sometimes the ones who lie to us the deepest. In the weeks that followed, I became a detective in my own life. I searched for clues in places I had never thought to look, examined my memories for inconsistencies, listened to my mother's words with a new and terrible attention. And the more I searched, the more I found. The first thing I noticed was the way she controlled information. We never had visitors, we never attended family events, because according to her, we had no family. We never stayed in one place for too long. Before Millbrook, we had lived in 3 other towns. She always said it was because of work, because nursing jobs were easier to find in smaller communities. But now I wondered if there was another reason. I went back to the cabin every day that week, searching for more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle. I found newspaper clippings hidden in a box under the cot, yellowed with age and carefully preserved. They told a story that made my blood run cold. Local boy missing, foul play suspected. The headline was from a San Francisco newspaper dated July 1990. The article described the disappearance of 3-year-old Marcus Chen, taken from his home, while his father, Daniel Chen, was at work. The prime suspect was the boy's mother, Grace Chen, who had vanished on the same day. Despite an extensive search, neither mother nor child had ever been found. I was that missing boy. The photographs proved it. The dates aligned. And suddenly my entire life made a horrible kind of sense. But I couldn't simply accept this truth. I needed to understand it. I needed to know why. Why would my mother steal me from my father? Why would she run? Why would she build a life based on lies? The answer came from an unlikely source. Tommy Rodriguez's older brother, Miguel, worked part-time at the town library. He had access to newspaper archives and computer databases that weren't available to the public. I told him I was working on a school project about missing children, and he helped me search for more information without asking too many questions. What I found changed everything. My father, Daniel Chen, had been arrested in 1989 on suspicion of domestic abuse. The charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but the arrest record remained. According to court documents, my mother had filed for divorce immediately after, citing irreconcilable differences. She had also filed for a restraining order, which was granted. And then 6 months later, she had vanished with me. The newspaper articles painted my father as a violent man, a dangerous husband, a threat to his own family. But the letter I had found told a different story. In that letter, my father claimed that the abuse allegations were fabricated, that my mother had invented the charges to gain sole custody, that when the court hadn't given her what she wanted, she had taken matters into her own hands. Who was telling the truth? I was 11 years old, and I had to decide whether to believe the mother who had raised me or the father I had never known. I chose to investigate further, Over the next month, I became someone I didn't recognize. I started searching my mother's belongings while she was at work, looking for evidence of who she really was. I found multiple identification documents with different names. I found bank statements from accounts I didn't know existed. I found a locked box hidden in the back of her closet, which I eventually opened using a hairpin and a YouTube tutorial that took me 3 hours to master. Inside the box, I found letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all from my father. Letters that had been sent to the P.O. boxes my mother kept in different towns, intercepted and never delivered. Birthday letters, Christmas letters, letters that simply said he missed me and loved me and would never stop looking for me. My father had been searching for me for 8 years. He had hired private investigators. He had created websites and distributed flyers. He had appeared on television shows dedicated to finding missing children. And all along, my mother had been one step ahead, moving us whenever the search got too close, creating new identities, building new lives. Reading those letters, I felt something I had never felt before. Rage. Pure, burning rage at the mother who had stolen me from a father who loved me, at the woman who had made me complicit in her crime simply by being her son. But there was another feeling beneath the rage, one that was harder to name. Despite everything I had discovered, I still loved her. She was still the woman who had raised me, who had comforted me when I was scared, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. The mother I knew and the kidnapper I was discovering seemed like two different people, and I couldn't reconcile them in my mind. I was 11 years old, and I was learning that love and betrayal could exist in the same heart at the same time. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. If you discovered that someone you loved had built your entire relationship on lies, would you be able to forgive them? Would the love you felt be enough to overcome the betrayal? Leave your answer in the comments, because I struggled with this question for years, and I'm still not sure I know the answer. The letters from my father included an email address. He had set up a Gmail account specifically for me, just in case I ever found his messages and wanted to reach out. For 3 days, I stared at that address, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to contact him immediately, to finally meet the father I had been denied. But another part of me was terrified. What if the newspapers were right? What if my mother had taken me to protect me from a violent man? What if contacting him put both of us in danger? In the end, I decided to test him. I created a fake email account using the library computers, and I wrote him a message that didn't reveal who I was. I said I was a journalist investigating cold cases involving missing children, and I wanted to interview him about his son. His response came within hours. It was long and detailed and heartbreaking. He told me about the day I disappeared, about how he had come home from work to find the house empty and a note that said only, "I'm sorry." He told me about the years of searching, the false leads and dead ends, the way hope slowly turned to despair and then back to hope again. He told me he had never stopped believing he would find me, that he lit a candle for me every night and talked to me as if I could hear him. But what convinced me more than anything else was what he didn't say. He never spoke badly about my mother. Even after everything she had done, he refused to vilify her. He said he believed she was mentally ill, that she needed help rather than punishment. He said he didn't want vengeance. He only wanted his son back. A violent, abusive man wouldn't write like that. A monster wouldn't show compassion for the woman who had destroyed his life. I made my decision. The next email I sent was the truth. I told him who I was, where I was, what I had discovered. I told him I was scared and confused and didn't know what to do. And I asked him to help me. His response came so quickly that he must have been sitting at his computer, waiting. It was simple and direct. I'm coming to get you. Stay safe. Don't confront your mother. I will be there in 3 days. For those 3 days, I lived a double life. I went to school and ate dinner with my mother and pretended that nothing had changed. But inside, I was counting the hours until my father arrived, until I could finally meet the man who had never stopped looking for me. But on the 3rd day, something went wrong. My mother came home early from work and she was agitated in a way I had never seen before. She moved through the house quickly, pulling suitcases from the closet, throwing clothes into bags, telling me we had to leave immediately. Something's come up at the hospital, she said, but her eyes were wild and her hands were shaking. We're going to visit an old friend for a while. It's a surprise vacation. She had found out somehow. Maybe she monitored my internet activity. Maybe she had connections who warned her that my father was coming. However it happened, she knew, and she was trying to run again. I had to make a choice. I could go with her, continue the life of lies, protect the only mother I'd ever known, or I could stand my ground and wait for my father, finally breaking free of the prison I hadn't known I was in. I was 11 years old, and the next words out of my mouth would determine the rest of my life. No, I said. My mother stopped. She looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize, something between fear and fury. Yeah, what did you say? I said no. I know the truth, Mom. I know what you did. I know about Dad. I know about the kidnapping. And I'm not going anywhere with you. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. And in my mother's eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. The face of a stranger. What happened next is burned into my memory with perfect, terrible clarity. My mother's face transformed, the mask of loving concern falling away to reveal something cold and calculating beneath. She walked to the door and locked it, then turned back to me with eyes that no longer held any warmth. "Sit down, Marcus," she said, and her voice was different now, harder and more controlled. "We need to talk about what you think you know." I sat on the couch, my heart hammering in my chest. She sat across from me in the armchair, and for a long moment she simply studied me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "I should have known this day would come," she said finally. "You were always too curious, too smart for your own good. I suppose I have myself to blame for that." "You kidnapped me," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "You stole me from my father and made me believe he abandoned us." "I saved you," she corrected, and there was genuine conviction in her voice. "Your father was a dangerous man, Marcus. The things he did to me, the things he would have done to you if I hadn't gotten us out. You can't imagine." The charges were dropped. There was no evidence of abuse. Her eyes flashed. Of course there was no evidence. He was careful. They're always careful. But I knew what he was capable of, and I wasn't going to wait until he hurt you to take action. Then why didn't you go through the courts? Why didn't you fight for custody legally? because the system doesn't protect women like me. Her composure cracked, and I saw something raw beneath it. I tried, Marcus. I filed every motion, made every plea. But your father had money and connections, and I had nothing. The court was going to give him custody, was going to hand you over to a man who beat me when no one was looking. So I did what I had to do. I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted her story to be true, wanted my father to be the monster she described, wanted my mother to be the hero she claimed to be. But I had read his letters. I had felt his love pouring through every word. And I'd seen the evidence of my mother's lies scattered throughout my life. I found the letters, I said, the ones he wrote to me. You intercepted them. You kept them from me. Of course I did. They were manipulation, Marcus. He was trying to turn you against me, trying to convince you that black was white and up was down. That's what abusers do. They're charming. They seem reasonable. They make you doubt your own perception of reality. Then why run? If you're innocent, why have we moved 4 times in 8 years? Why the fake names? Why the constant hiding? She leaned forward and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Because your father will kill me if he finds us. He said so. The night before I left, he put his hands around my throat and told me that if I ever tried to take you, he would hunt me down and make me suffer in ways I couldn't imagine. So yes, I run, I hide. I do whatever it takes to keep us safe. The story was compelling, and part of me could see it playing out exactly as she described. An abusive husband, a failed legal system, a desperate mother who saw no other option. If I hadn't found my father's letters, if I hadn't felt the truth in his words, I might have believed her. But I had read those letters, and I knew with a certainty I couldn't explain that my father was not the man she described. He's coming, I said, watching her face carefully. I contacted him, and he's coming to get me. The blood drained from her face. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes, and it didn't look like the fear of an abuse victim. It looked like the fear of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Marcus, you don't know what you've done. You've put both of us in danger. We have to leave now tonight before he gets here. I'm not going anywhere with you. You're 11 years old. You don't get to make that decision. She stood up abruptly, and I saw her muscles tense, saw her calculating the distance between us. And in that moment, I realized something that chilled me to my core. My mother was considering whether she could force me to leave. I stood up too, backing toward the door. Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't. Marcus, please. Her voice shifted again, becoming softer, more pleading. I'm your mother. I love you more than anything in this world. Everything I've done to protect you. Can't you see that? Can't you trust me? You lied to me my whole life. You stole me from my father. You made me believe I was unloved when all along he was searching for me. How am I supposed to trust you after that? Tears streamed down her face, and they looked genuine. That was the cruelest part, I think. She wasn't performing for my benefit. She truly believed she was the victim, that her actions were justified, that she had saved me rather than stolen me. I know I made mistakes, she whispered. I know I should have told you the truth. But I was afraid, Marcus. Afraid you would hate me, afraid you would choose him, afraid I would lose you. Don't you see? Everything I did out of love. And there it was. The fundamental truth that would haunt me for years to come. My mother genuinely loved me. Her love was possessive and controlling and deeply unhealthy, but it was real. She hadn't stolen me for money or revenge or cruelty. She had stolen me because she couldn't bear to share me, couldn't stand the thought of another person having a claim on my heart. She had committed the most unforgivable crime I've ever seen, and she had done it out of love, and that made it so much harder to hate her. "I know you love me," I said, and my own voice was breaking now, "but love doesn't justify what you did. You took my father from me. You took my choices, my identity, my truth. That's not protection, that's control." She took a step toward me, and I took a step back, my hand finding the doorknob behind me. "Marcus, please don't do this. Don't choose him over me. I'm your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you." And he spent 8 years searching for me. He never gave up. He never stopped loving me, even though he never got to know me. That counts for something too. The front door suddenly shook with a heavy knock, and we both froze. A voice called out from the other side, a voice I had never heard but somehow recognized. "Marcus, it's Daniel. It's your father. Please open the door." For a moment that seemed to last forever, my mother and I stared at each other. I saw in her eyes a terrible mixture of emotions: fear, anger, grief, desperation. I saw the woman who had raised me and the woman who had lied to me, and I understood that they were not two different people. They were both my mother, complicated and flawed and human. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Then I turned and opened the door. My father stood on the porch, and he looked exactly like his photograph, just older and more worn. When he saw me, his face crumpled with an emotion so raw that it took my breath away. He reached out, hesitated, then pulled me into an embrace that felt like coming home. Behind me, I heard my mother collapse to her knees, sobbing. I heard the sound of police sirens in the distance growing closer. I felt my father's arms around me, strong and protective. And I heard him whisper words I had waited 11 years to hear. "I found you. I finally found you. It's over, Marcus. You're safe now. You're home." But as I clung to my father and listened to my mother weep, I knew that nothing was truly over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would bring its own challenges and its own pain. Because the truth is that there are no clean endings in real life, no moments when everything is resolved and everyone lives happily ever after. There is only the messy, complicated work of moving forward, of learning to live with the choices we've made and the choices that have been made for us. And I was just beginning to understand how difficult that work would be. The days following my reunion with my father were a blur of police interviews, social workers, and lawyers. My mother was arrested and charged with parental kidnapping, custodial interference, and a host of other crimes. I was placed in temporary custody of my father while the legal system decided our future. Living with my father was strange at first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. His house in San Francisco was larger than any place I'd ever lived, filled with photographs of me at every age. He had created a shrine to a son he didn't know, documenting every birthday I had missed, every Christmas I should have shared with him. He didn't push me to talk about what had happened or how I was feeling. He simply made himself available, letting me know he was there whenever I was ready. He cooked me breakfast every morning, helped me with my homework every evening, and tucked me into bed every night with a kiss on my forehead that felt both foreign and familiar. "I know this is a lot to process," he said one night, sitting on the edge of my bed. I know you probably have a million questions and a million emotions and no idea what to do with any of it. I just want you to know that whatever you're feeling, it's okay. There's no right way to handle something like this. Do you hate her? I asked, and the question surprised me as much as it surprised him. He was quiet for a long moment, considering. I did, and did for a long time. When you first disappeared, all I felt was rage. I wanted to find her and make her pay for what she had done, but over the years, the anger burned itself out. What was left was just sadness. Sadness for you, for what you were missing. Sadness for her, for whatever was so broken inside her that she thought this was the right thing to do. And sadness for myself, for all the time we lost. I still love her, I admitted, and it felt like a confession of something shameful. I know she did something terrible. I know she lied to me and stole me and hurt you, but I can't just turn off my feelings. She's still my mom. Of course she is, and of course you love her. That's not something to be ashamed of, Marcus. Love doesn't follow logic. It doesn't care about right and wrong. You can love someone and still recognize that they hurt you. Those two things can exist together. It was the wisest thing anyone had ever said to me, and I carried those words with me like a talisman in the difficult months that followed. The trial was brutal. My mother's lawyers argued that she had acted out of genuine fear for my safety, that my father's abuse, though never proven, had been real and terrifying. My father's lawyers countered with evidence of her careful planning, her multiple identities, her pattern of deception. I was called to testify, and I had to sit in a courtroom and answer questions about my childhood while my mother watched from the defendant's table, her eyes never leaving my face. The hardest part was seeing her like that, small and tired and broken, dressed in prison clothes that made her look like a stranger. The mother I knew had been confident and capable, always in control. The woman in that courtroom was a shell, hollowed out by circumstances she had created. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 8. When the verdict was read, she didn't cry or protest. She simply nodded, as if she had been expecting this outcome all along. Before they led her away, she turned to look at me one last time. "I'm sorry," she mouthed, and I could see that she meant it. I wanted to say something back, to give her some word of comfort or forgiveness, but my throat closed around the words, and all I could do was watch as they led her out of the courtroom and out of my life. That night I cried for the first time since everything had happened. My father held me while I sobbed, not trying to fix anything, just being present with me in my pain. And I realized that this was what I had been missing all those years. A parent who could simply be with me without trying to control or manipulate or protect me from the truth. The months that followed were a process of rebuilding. I started at a new school, made new friends, began the slow work of creating a new identity for myself. I went to therapy 3 times a week, untangling the complicated knot of emotions that my mother's betrayal had created. I learned about something called parental alienation, about the psychological damage that can result from one parent systematically destroying a child's relationship with the other. I learned that what had happened to me was not uncommon, that thousands of children every year were stolen by one parent and hidden from the other. I learned that the scars of such trauma can last a lifetime, affecting everything from trust issues to attachment styles to the ability to form healthy relationships. But I also learned that healing was possible, that with time and support and hard work, I could build a life that wasn't defined by what had been done to me. My father was patient throughout all of it. He never tried to replace my mother or erase her from my history. He kept photographs of her in my room if I wanted them. He allowed me to write letters to her in prison. He even drove me to visit her when I finally felt ready, sitting in the waiting room while I sat across from her in the visitors area and tried to find words for everything I was feeling. Those visits were always painful. My mother maintained her version of events, insisting that she had saved me from a monster, that the courts had been corrupted against her, that one day I would understand the sacrifice she had made. I could never tell if she truly believed these things or if she had simply repeated them so often that they had become true in her mind. But occasionally, in unguarded moments, I saw glimpses of something else. Regret, shame, the understanding that she had destroyed her own life and damaged mine in ways that could never be fully repaired. In those moments, I felt connected to her again, felt the love that still existed beneath all the hurt. Forgiveness is not a destination, my therapist told me once. It's a practice, something you do over and over, not because the person deserves it, but because carrying anger and resentment hurts you more than it hurts them. I practiced forgiveness like it was a skill, like playing piano or learning a language. Some days it came easily, other days it felt impossible. But I kept practicing because I didn't want to become a person defined by bitterness, didn't want my mother's crime to be the central fact of my existence. By the time I turned 15, I had built something resembling a normal life. I had friends who knew my history and accepted me anyway. I had a relationship with my father that was genuine and deep, forged in the fire of shared trauma. I'd even started dating, cautiously exploring what it meant to trust another person with my heart. But there was still something unresolved, something that nagged at the edges of my consciousness. I had found my father. I had faced my mother. I had done the work of healing. And yet I felt like there was something missing, some piece of the puzzle that hadn't yet fallen into place. I didn't know it then, but the missing piece was about to arrive in the most unexpected way imaginable. And when it did, it would change everything all over again. I was 16 when I received the letter. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, slipped into the mailbox between utility bills and advertising circulars. The envelope was plain white with my name written in careful block letters. There was no return address. Inside, I found a single page covered in handwriting I didn't recognize. The letter was brief but explosive, and after I finished reading it, I had to sit down because my legs had stopped working. "Dear Marcus," it began, "you don't know me, but I know you. I've been watching you for years, making sure you were safe, making sure you were happy. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm your sister. Our mother never told you about me because I am the reason she took you. And now that you're old enough to understand, I think it's time you knew the truth." I read the letter 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. A sister. I had a sister. A sister my mother had never mentioned. A sister whose existence had been hidden from me just like my father's love had been hidden. The letter continued. "I was 8 years old when you were born. Our mother was different then, softer and more stable. But after you arrived, something changed in her. She became obsessed with you in a way that scared me. She would hold you for hours, refusing to let anyone else touch you. She would check on you dozens of times each night, convinced that something would happen to you if she wasn't watching. When I was 10, I told our father that I was worried about Mom. I told him about the strange behaviors, the possessiveness, the way she talked about you like you were an object rather than a person. He tried to get her help, tried to convince her to see a therapist. But she refused, and that's when things got bad. She accused him of abuse, made up stories about violence that never happened. I was too young to understand what was going on, but I remember the police coming to our house. Remember Dad being taken away in handcuffs. I remember Mom telling me that we were leaving, that we were taking you somewhere safe. But she didn't take me with you. She left me with Dad, Marcus. She took you and ran, and she left me behind as if I didn't matter, as if I wasn't worth saving. I was 10 years old, and my mother abandoned me because I told the truth about what she was becoming. For years, I blamed myself. I thought if I had just kept quiet, if I just pretended everything was fine, I would still have a mother and a brother. But eventually I understood that none of it was my fault. Our mother was sick, Marcus. Not evil, just sick. And her sickness destroyed our family. I've wanted to contact you for a long time, but I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid you would blame me, afraid that opening old wounds would just cause more pain. But I've watched you grow up from a distance, seen the young man you've become, and I think you're ready now. I think you're strong enough to know the whole truth. If you want to meet me, I'll be at the Fillmore Street Cafe every Saturday from noon until 2. I'll keep coming until you're ready or until I understand that you don't want to know me. I hope you want to know me, Marcus. I've been waiting 16 years to be your sister again. The letter was signed simply Sarah, with a small drawing of a bird beneath the name. I didn't tell my father about the letter. I don't know why I kept it secret, except that some part of me needed to process this information on my own before sharing it with anyone else. A sister. A whole other person who shared my blood, my history, my mother. That Saturday, I went to the Fillmore Street Cafe. I spotted her immediately, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee. She wasn't drinking. She looked like our mother, the same dark hair and delicate features. But there was something different about her eyes. They were softer, warmer, without the hardness I had come to associate with my mother's gaze. When she saw me, her face broke into a smile that transformed her completely. She stood up, and I saw that she was tall, much taller than me, with the athletic build of someone who ran or swam. She was beautiful in a way that felt familiar, like looking at a photograph of someone I should remember but couldn't quite place. Marcus, she said, and her voice cracked on my name. God, look at you. You're so grown up. The last time I saw you, you were 3 years old, and you wouldn't stop asking for your yellow blanket. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just stood there, looking at this stranger who was also my family, trying to reconcile her presence with everything I thought I knew about my life. She seemed to understand my silence. It's okay, she said. You don't have to say anything. Just sit with me for a while. Let me look at you. I sat down across from her, and for a long moment, we simply studied each other. I saw traces of myself in her face, in the shape of her jaw and the curve of her eyebrows. I saw traces of our mother, too, and of a father I was still learning to know. The letter, I finally said. What you wrote about Mom. Is it true? Every word. I wouldn't have contacted you if I wasn't sure. Why didn't Dad tell me about you? Why doesn't anyone talk about you? She sighed, and I saw old pain surface in her eyes. Because talking about me means talking about what Mom really is. Dad tried to protect you from that as long as he could. He thought it was better for you to think of her as a kidnapper rather than as someone who was truly mentally ill, someone who chose one child over another and left the discarded one behind. That's what she did. She just left you. I was standing on the porch when she drove away. I remember calling after the car, running down the street, screaming for her to come back. She didn't even look in the rearview mirror, Marcus. She just kept driving. I tried to imagine it. A 10-year-old girl, watching her mother and baby brother disappear down the road, knowing she had been deemed unworthy of love and protection. The image was so painful that I had to look away. "I'm sorry," I said, and the words felt inadequate. "It wasn't your fault. You were a baby. You didn't ask to be taken, just like you didn't ask to be her obsession." We were both victims, Marcus. Different kinds of victims, but victims all the same. We talked for hours that day, and in the weeks that followed, we talked for hours more. Sarah filled in gaps in my history that I hadn't known existed, told me stories about our family from before everything fell apart. She showed me photographs of us together as children, images I had never seen, moments I had been too young to remember. She told me about her own difficult years, the depression and anxiety that had followed our mother's abandonment. She told me about the therapy that had helped her heal, the career she had built as a social worker helping other children in crisis. She told me that helping others had been her way of making sense of what had happened to her, of turning her pain into something meaningful. And she told me something else, something that would become the key to the final chapter of this story. "Mom's parole hearing is coming up," she said. "In 6 months, she could be released. I've been asked to submit a statement, and so has Dad. But the victim impact statement that matters most is yours, Marcus. You're the one she took.